Hey, welcome back to another episode of House of Cards. It is right before Thanksgiving, and I am thankful for all of you and people watching my channel and subscribing and liking and doing all the things that you do. And I continue to make these videos honestly out of pure joy of the hobby that I am a part of, but also because I feel like I have learned quite a bit over the last chunk of time here, and I want to share a lot of my experiences with some of those that are newer to the hobby and or might be struggling with certain aspects of collecting. Myself, I've made a lot of mistakes over the past couple years, and I definitely want to share some of my experiences with you to hopefully give you guys a better opportunity of not making the same costly mistakes that I have in the past. And again, I continue to learn. I'm a student of the hobby. I don't ever feel like I know everything and continue to make mistakes myself. However, the important part is that we all educate ourselves, and we pass along hobby knowledge to others so they can have a successful hobby experience. And I think the more success everyone has in this hobby, the more the hobby will continue to grow and flourish, as people will have positive experiences versus getting burned and then jumping out and not looking back, which is what we don't want, because we want more people to join the hobby, a healthier, sustainable ecosystem that we can all continue to love and enjoy together. So with all of that lovely talk out of the way, today's episode, I'm going to share with you one of the most important things I think in my world when it comes to collecting is purchasing cards online, and sort of what are the best practices when doing so. Because as you all know, there is a lot to kind of understand when you're buying cards online. It's not just about the player, it's not just about the set, but really it's about the card itself. And if you're like me, you purchase raw cards online, and when doing so, there is a lot of risk involved, and I've learned many lessons on what to do and what not to do when buying raw cards online. Because unfortunately, within any industry, and it's not just the hobby, it's across the board, any kind of collectible, any kind of merchandise or sought after items online does come with a handful of bad apples out there trying to take advantage of people. And you can get caught up in some of those scams sometimes, and it's no fault of your own, as a lot of them are great actors, and they definitely can make it seem like there's no issues with what they're doing. But in reality, if you look for a few key things, you can sometimes pick out or at least weed through some of the bad apples out there to avoid being hustled. So today's video is going to be about buying cards online, specifically eBay in this instance, and this is more catered towards raw cards, obviously, because we don't want to have to talk about the differences between raw and graded, because really when you're buying a graded card, there is some peace of mind that the card is has been thoroughly looked over and given a grade, so you don't have to worry as much, even though that's not always the case. But we'll leave that for another day. At any rate, today's video, let's go over some of the key aspects of looking for high quality raw cards that will potentially grade out decent for you. And again, disclaimer, I'm never going to promise anyone a 10. Even following these tips, you have to realize that you should always go in with the mindset that you're not going to get a Gem Mint 10, and that you hopefully, best case scenario, are going to get a 9. And if that is the case, then hey, that's what we're all shooting for. If we get a 10, then it's just icing on the cake. And I think that's something that we all should put into our mindset, because going in with the anticipation of getting a 10 is just going to lead to a lot of frustration and anger when the cards come back. So at any rate, let's go ahead and start with this first slide here. And I named all this section key focus points when buying cards online to get an optimal grade. So the first and most important thing, and probably the most obvious thing that you can see when you're looking at cards online is centering, because centering is, the most visually, I guess you say, adaptable to just looking at a photograph of a card, as you're not going to be able to get into surface and edges and some of the other trickier criteria just by looking at a flat photograph of a card. But centering is something that you can pretty much nail by looking at pictures. So I would first start off with what we're looking at here, which are the basics, right? Your left to right, top to bottom centering needs to be a minimum of a 60-40 average. So for those of you who don't know, if you're looking at a card that is perfectly centered, it would be 50-50. So one side of the border in this case, and this is for a bordered card, which are obviously the easiest to get the centering right, is going to be 50-50. So meaning the left and the right border are exactly the same, 50-50. However, there is a little bit of a, I guess you say, PSA will give you a little bit of a grace in terms of the bordering and still keep your card eligible to gem mint, but you can't go any further out than 60-40. So that's a very slight, difference, but you can still have a slight difference. So don't always worry if it's just a hair heavier on one side than the other, because PSA does let those slide, and that there are plenty of examples out there of cards that are gem minting with not a perfect 50-50. I'll show an example here. So at any rate, let's focus on making sure that the borders are as close to a 50-50 as possible, but no further than a 60-40. And again, there's not an exact formula to be able to tell this unless you want to get really geeky and, drop a picture into some sort of a Photoshop or CAD, type of software where you can sit there and measure it out. I gotten pretty good at putting my eyeballs to it and being able to give it a quick look over. And I think once you do enough of these, you'll feel pretty confident that if it looks a little heavier than it should, then you're probably out of that 60-40 range. So I wouldn't spend too much time geeking out on this, but hey, if it makes you feel better, go for it. But I would say just continue to train your eye to look for as close to a 50-50 or as much as a 60-40 differentiation. Top to bottom also as left to right. And again, top to bottom is where a lot of people get messed up, because the left to right is so obvious. The eyes pick it up a lot quicker than they would top to bottom. So don't get lazy and make sure you look at your card on all sides. And if it makes it easier for you, one trick would be to look at the card, and if you're looking at on your phone, for instance, is rotate your phone so now the card is horizontal, and then look at it left to right, because that is actually your top to bottom. Hope that makes sense. All right, moving on to the next slide. Now this is talking about the surface, which honestly, this is the one where I think a lot of, shady, I don't want to use the word shady because that sounds terrible, but a lot of sellers who are experienced don't really disclose out surface issues, because inexperienced buyers typically don't understand the surface and how that is accounted when grading. So a lot of times I think, and I hate to say this, but there are some sellers out there who will sell cards that have surface issues. They won't notate that in the description, and they already know in their heart of hearts that this card isn't going to grade well at PSA, because any experienced grader will know that a significant surface issue will pretty much take you down to an 8 at best case scenario. Even if you have great corners and borders and everything else, the surface can really affect your grading. So look really closely at the surface as best you can in the pictures. If they have a scan like this example I'm showing you here, then you can get a good idea. But the problem too is a lot of the time is people take pictures with the card inside of a soft sleeve or inside of a top loader or inside of both, which will really drastically kind of skew of what's going on the surface, because you can't tell if these little imperfections or scratches or what have you are on the plastic or are they actually on the card itself. So I think the best thing to do, and I am a steward of this method, is I literally message every single person who's selling a card that I'm interested in and just politely ask them, hey, could you disclose any surface issues like scratches or dimples or print lines? And I kind of, show them a few examples just so they understand what I'm specifically looking for. If you just say, hey, is there anything wrong with the surface? They might say no, but they may not understand that like a print line or, a dimple is considered a surface issue, because a lot of the times people think that any kind of flaws with the card are human caused, right? You scratched it accidentally when you were, sliding it around on the table, or you did something to it. Whereas a lot of times, if the card comes out of a pack or, is basically, a manufacturer defect, then they don't consider that something wrong with the card, because like, oh, well, that's the way it came, so that shouldn't count because it's just the way it is, right? But in reality, we all know that even manufacturer defects count. So make sure you call it out. Say as many of the surface issues possible. I like to use the 3 of scratches, dimples, or print lines, because I think that kind of covers the main, kind of issues that you'll come up with. So that is something very easy to just kind of throw out there. And you know what? I get like a 90% response rate when I ask this question, and I would tell you about 50% of the time, and I'm not exaggerating here, and I've probably done this 50 to 100 times, at least 50% of the time they'll write back and they will actually say there's a surface issue. And that is a little bit alarming, considering the fact that they did not list that issue in their description, which to me, call it what you want to call it. I call it a little bit of people trying to take advantage of people. And I hate to say that, because I think there are a handful of people that just don't understand surface and don't really think of it as one of the major sort of like flaws in a card. They look at, corners and centering, which, are the 2 that most people look at. But surface is the one that gets overlooked a lot. So ask them, and you'll probably get a response back. And if they're a good, honest seller, or they understand that you're a little bit savvier than the average, buyer, then they'll probably disclose surface issues. And another good thing too is, if they don't disclose it, or they say, no, the surface is great, and you get the card and there is a surface issue, you have at least some sort of a correspondence with the seller of them basically giving a false or misleading description of the item. So when you go to return it, if that's something you want to do, you have some sort of, I guess you say, evidence of them sort of giving a misleading or false listing, and the card actually having damage that wasn't disclosed, which you will always win on that behalf if they challenge it through eBay or whatever. So again, I think this is a great practice to do, is just ask. And again, it takes 5 seconds, 1 sentence or 2 sentence question, shoot them the message, and you'll see what happens. So other things too is just look at your corners, obviously. Look at the edges for any chipping issues. And again, that is something that is, on the more chrome cards nowadays, edges are a little bit easier to get away with. But of course, always should check edges, because that is one of the most overlooked areas of the card. All right. Now we're going to talk about the next issue, which, again, these are cards with borders that we've been talking about. But when you get to other cards that don't have borders, it gets a little bit trickier. So you got to look for certain key graphics on the card that basically will give you sort of an anchor point for the centering of the card. And that's a little bit trickier, because a lot of people's brains don't really work that way. They want to see some sort of clear indicators that they can tell right away if it's centered. But a lot of cards will have an area of the card or a specific graphic on the card that you can use to sort of look for a balance between top to bottom and left to right. So for example, on this select card, the actual select logo itself acts as an anchor graphic to kind of look for centering. So as you can tell from the picture, the left to right and top to bottom, from where the edge of the card is to where the S for the select is, has about an equal distance between them, which is a key indicator that this card is well centered, because of that very fact that you can see right away that there's a reason why the designer of this card chose to put the select there in that corner, and it gives it that nice quick to spot sort of, you know, balance point between top to bottom and left to right. So that is a quick way to do it. You know, other cards have other ways of doing it, but not every non-bordered card has this cheat method. So sometimes you actually have to rely on the actual looking at a Gem Mint 10 card to give you the key indicators in order to tell, you know, where it's at, you know, because there are cards that don't really use this method, or they have it like between two different graphics on the card. So really you just gotta find the Gem Mint 10 copy of the card that you're interested in, and find the card that you're interested in and compare it to the Gem Mint 10 copy. So pretty, you know, easy to grasp way of doing this. And I recommend doing this for any card, you know, that you have questions about. Even if you feel confident, I would always look for the key indicators on the perfect Gem Mint 10 card. Now, don't forget that not all Gem Mint 10 cards, and I'm talking about PSA cards, have perfect centering. So you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. I actually look at multiple Gem Mint 10 copies online to see if I can, you know, at least kind of see the nuances between them and make sure that the cards have at least a similar pattern as far as where the centering should be at for a Gem Mint 10 copy. So as long as the card that you're buying kind of falls within those parameters, I think you got a good shot at getting a nice grade. And again, we're just talking about centering here. There are all the other aspects, corners, edges, surface as well. But if you can at least get the centering part down, you know, you're at least one step closer to getting a good grade. All right, and lastly, I just want to kind of throw out a few more additional tips. And these are other things that I've kind of picked up along the way, learned obviously the hard way on some of these, but I think these are also great tips to kind of make sure you stick in the back of your head. So the first one is a really important one. If photos aren't good, ask for more. And a lot of the times, I think there's two camps in this mindset of people that put crappy photos up of their cards. There are the people who legitimately just don't really understand the value of a good photo, and they're just, you know, snapping in the dark, you know, out of focus on their bed or whatever. I don't think they're always trying to hustle you or try to mislead you. I just think they just don't really understand, because, you know, they'll probably have a bunch of other listings of, like, you know, old Nintendo games and, you know, hair dryers and stuff, that they look at cards as just a basic commodity. They don't understand the nuances of condition and all the things that, you know, us collectors care about. So they take the picture with very little thought. And in that case, these people are generally pretty open to sending you more pictures. And a lot of these times you'll find these people with their cards in screw downs and other kind of key indicators that they are old collectors, or they've gotten these cards through some sort of a hand-me-down or whatever. So sometimes you might need to give them a little bit more guidance of what you're looking for. So, you know, ask them to take it in good light, or ask them maybe even if they could, you know, take the card out of the holder and take some photos. Again, that runs a little bit of risk of, you know, more handling of the card, but sometimes it's important, because you don't want to obviously buy a card that is completely, you know, you can't tell what the condition is because the photos are so bad. And then there's the other side of the camp on this, which is people who take these really crazy angled photos of cards that you know that they are just trying to hustle you into thinking that the card is more well-centered than it really is. And I kind of laugh every time I see this, like, why would somebody in their right mind decide to take a picture of a card at this just crazy angle instead of just taking a straight down picture of it, right? You gotta just use your common sense on this one, guys. If there's some crazy angle, there is something that they're hiding, and it's just something that, you know, just, I say red flag, walk away from these cards. However, if you want to ask them for a more straight, you know, top down photo of the card, go for it. But just know that you're probably going to get a picture back showing the card is super off center, and you probably won't want it anyways. So Again, photos are very important. This is all we have to go on eBay. You can't look at videos. You can't, touch or feel the card or anything like that. Photos are everything. So asking for more photos or for better photos is completely in line. And I think that a lot of the times good sellers will supply that. And I've had actually great experience with that myself. Number 2, always look at the back of the card. I think we get so caught up with the front of the card that we always forget about the back of the card. And the back is important, but it's not as important as the front. And as an example, I'll show you this PSA sort of grading criteria. The back can be pretty wacky as far as the centering goes. I think it is as far as 75-25, which is pretty bad, but the back does still matter. So the back can have damage that you can't see on the front. The back can have, we've all seen those lines that go across some of the more ultra modern cards. Those are just, manufacturer defect lines when they come off of the print presses. There are all kinds of things, and definitely look at the surface on the back, because there's been many times where I've graded a card and it came back with a low grade because of a small dimple on the back that I just did not pay attention to when I sent it in. So back of the card is important, but again, don't get too caught up on the back, because the front is, where the centering and that part really is the most important. But the other areas, edges, corners, and surface, do still count pretty heavily on the back. All right, number 3, buy raw cards shortly after the release of a new product. So I buy raw cards from all eras and decades, so it's a little bit harder, and that's why my standards are a lot lower on older cards in terms of getting super good grades, because 9 out of 10 times the cards have been picked through. They've been, the sellers probably have already either sent in the good versions for get graded, or, they just might know right away that the card's not going to grade well, so that's why they're selling it raw. However, when you're buying ultra modern cards or a brand new card release, you can get cards right away from people because they just don't want to play the grading game, and they want to sell their cards immediately after ripping them out of the packs. So this is the key time to buy, because a lot of the times these cards will come out gem mints or pack fresh, and they will be in really good condition. And like I said, a lot of times people don't want to tie their money up in months and months and months of grading, so they just want to crack it, flip it real quick on eBay, which gives you a great opportunity to get cards that are in great condition, because they haven't already been picked over, for years or decades online, as a lot of the, kind of older cards are. So I would recommend, once a product comes out that you're interested in, jump on that, wait, I would give it at least 2 weeks for the market to cool down a little bit, because you never want to buy it the day it comes out or even the first week it comes out, because obviously prices are going to be inflated. But if you can wait, 2 weeks, or best case scenario like a month, you'll get a better price for sure, and you'll still be in that kind of early phase to get the less picked over cards. So super important tip there, and I highly recommend following that. Number 4, be wary of raw cards being sold by sellers who primarily sell graded cards. So this is something that a lot of experienced buyers look for, is if you see a seller selling a card and, for the most part, it looks pretty decent and it's raw, of course, do a quick thing. Scroll down to the bottom of your eBay page and look for another section that says additional items from the seller, and that will show you right away what else this seller has available for sale. And if you notice that every single other thing that he's selling is a graded card, and for some reason there's a raw card that he's trying to sell that you're interested in, probably good odds are that that card is not gradable, or it would grade very poorly. So that's just a quick tip to see if they have, a huge history of only selling graded cards, and the random one raw card that they're selling, you could pretty much bet your good faith that that card is not gonna do well in the grading, because they probably would have already graded it. All right, number 5, inspect autographs. So if you're buying autograph cards that are raw, the autograph is an important part of the grading process. And even though PSA doesn't require autograph to be graded, if someone's going to buy your card that's a savvy, collector or investor or whatever, they know what to look for in an autograph. So if the autograph has any streakiness to it, or if the autograph is off of the sticker, like, the swoosh on the D went too much off of the sticker and it's not even on it anymore, or the ink doesn't look very crisp and sharp, like it looks really dull and sort of like worn down, those are things that are going to get docked. So the savvy investor is not going to be interested in these cards, and even though you can grade a card without getting the autograph graded, it's still going to be something that the smarter investor or dealer, if you choose to want to sell this card in the future, is not going to be as interested in this card because of that very fact. So inspect the autographs, make sure it's a nice bold, sharp autograph without any streaks, without any smudges, and that will give you a lot better resale value in the future. All right, number 6, check the eBay seller's feedback. This is kind of a no-brainer, but something very important. Just look real quick at their feedback. If they got 100% feedback and they have, thousands of sales, you can feel pretty confident that they're going to be a legitimate seller and probably be easier to deal with. However, if they have, even 3 negatives, is something to start being a little bit concerned about. Again, this is all in context to how many positives they have, but just be wary when you start looking at those sellers that have, say 98, 97, 95, 94% feedback, because that means they probably have a significant amount of negative, or probably also have a lot of neutral. So what I do is I just go look at their seller history and read the comments on the negative feedbacks to see what the feedback is. If it's something that's kind of silly, that doesn't really reflect as being shady in any way, then I think that you'll be okay. However, if it's something like, I received this card and it was damaged, or seller didn't disclose this or that, or whatever, what have you, there are some definitely red flags that you could pick up by looking at their feedback. Another thing too is also look at the fact that if they have 0 on their total number of feedbacks, there is always something a little fishy there. So I have had a couple instances where I went out on a limb and I bid on a card with a 0 feedback seller, and sometimes I just don't ever get a response. So I tried to pay one time and they, I guess their PayPal account hadn't been authorized yet or whatever, so my payment just never went through, so it just sat there in limbo forever. So anyways, there's a lot of times where these accounts get created and they just aren't ever like a real account, or maybe the person decided they don't want to sell it and they just never used their eBay after that or whatever. Sometimes though, if they only have a few feedbacks, like 3, 4, 5 feedbacks, I like to message them and just say, hey, I just want to make sure you're a real person. Actually, I did that about a week ago, and the guy wrote back and he said, oh, hey, I am a real person. I've actually sold 6 or 7 cards this week. I just, haven't gotten feedback yet because people haven't left it yet. So there should be some more coming. And he was very honest and polite, and I felt comfortable, bidding on it, even though he had very, very low feedback. So again, just do your due diligence and make sure that you spend the time looking at feedback and making sure that this person seems like a legit person. All right, number 7. This is one that I think is kind of a running joke in the hobby, but when people write in this description, PSA 10 ? That is always a little bit of a red flag to me, because I think that's a little bit of a scheme to get people to look at these cards when they're searching for PSA 10 candidates, and I think it's always kind of a red flag in the sense that it's, I don't know, I just feel like it's a little dishonest, because no one can say a card is a PSA 10, and just because they put a question mark, it just kind of, that's their way of getting out of the fact that they're making a claim that's not possibly true. So just, not saying you have to completely go away from those listings, but I would definitely be a little bit wary, because it just feels a little snake oil salesy to me. So just be cautious when you see that. And the final, I guess you could say this is the golden rule in most anything in life, but if the price is too good to be true, it probably is. So it's unfortunate, but if something just seems way out of whack, something just doesn't look right or feel right, if you're looking at, it looks like a Luka Doncic rookie, silver prism card, but it's actually a sticker that this guy made. It's not a real card because the price looks too good to be true. So again, just be careful and make sure that, again, if it looks too good to be true, either just walk away and try not to, even get involved, or do really deep dig on it and do your due diligence to make sure that it's not a scam. All right, guys. Well, that was a lot to go over, and hopefully you made it through this almost 30-minute long video. And I appreciate your time, and I hope this helps you guys out. Hopes you avoid making a few mistakes out there. Hope this, saves you some money at some point. And continue to go out there and buy and be good stewards of the hobby on eBay. If you're selling, be an honest seller. And if you're buying, make sure you do your research and take your time. Again, it's not a rush. Make sure you take your time. There'll always be another card tomorrow. So with that, please subscribe if you haven't. Shoot the video a like if I gave you any kind of value or insight. And until next time, peace.